Reddit, hi. My name is Jake, I'm 34, and 3.5 years ago my life turned into the kind of shit you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. 3 years have passed. Not only did I survive, I thrived. But I want to tell this story from start to finish, from the first red flag to the final blow. I grew up in Mesa, in a neighborhood where police helicopters fly at night not just for training. My father left when I was 12. I only remember his back in a faded t-shirt and the smell of cheap whiskey. My mom worked as a nurse in double shifts. She taught me one important thing. Don't whine and fix whatever breaks, because there's no money for a professional. At 15 I could already rebuild a lawnmower engine, and at 17 I could change brake pads on any sedan. I got into the University of Arizona for mechanical engineering. I studied during the day, worked at an Tucson tire auto shop at night for $8 an hour. I slept 4 hours. And it was there, in the parking lot in front of the student center, that I saw Marley. She was standing by her 2005 Jeep Cherokee, which was smoking like a steam engine, kicking the tire. Tall, slim, blonde hair in a ponytail, expensive sneakers I couldn't afford with a month's work. I walked over and asked if she needed help. She looked at me like I'd asked for a kidney, but then waved her hand. This coffin should have been junked years ago. In 10 minutes I found the problem, a burst coolant hose. Patched it with what I had, added antifreeze. She gave me $20 and said, "You're really a handyman. What's your name?" Her name was Marley. She was studying marketing. Her father owned a chain of auto repair shops called Desert Wrenches, 4 locations in Phoenix and Scottsdale. Her mother Beverly stayed home and did charity work. She was the kind of person who genuinely didn't understand why someone couldn't just ask dad for money. We started dating. I thought I was lucky. A beautiful girl from a rich family noticed a guy with calloused hands. On our 3rd date she said, "You're not like the others. You actually know how things work." My dad fired all his managers because they didn't know anything about repairs. I took the bait. Back then it felt like destiny. Her father, Dennis, disliked me from the first minute. We met at a family barbecue in their Paradise Valley house, a 3-level mansion with a pool and 3 garages. Dennis was a stocky guy with a belly, balding head, and a Marine drill sergeant voice. He shook my hand and asked, "So, a mechanic?" "Not engineering student, but mechanic." Marley squeaked, "Dad," but I kept quiet. Back then I thought I'd prove myself through actions. Marley's mother Beverly was a sweet woman who always seemed a bit distant. She poured me tea and asked about school, but I saw her looking at my jeans. They were clean but had a patch on the knee. We got married when we were both 22, right after graduation. The wedding was paid for by Dennis. $6,000, 100 guests, flowers, a limousine. I felt like an imposter in a rented tux. Marley was happy. She yelled, "I love you," on the dance floor, and I believed every word. The first 5 years of marriage were tough, but I called it building a foundation. We bought a small house in Chandler for $240K. I put down $20K from the money I'd been saving since I was 16 for my own shop. The mortgage was $870 a month, laughable now, but back then it was a huge sum for me. I went to work for Dennis. He agreed to hire me as head mechanic at his busiest shop on Thomas Road. Paid me $55K a year, tolerable in 2014, but not for someone who actually ran the processes. I quickly realized that Marley's father's business was a mess. Accounting in Excel, parts purchases through a friend of a friend with a 40% markup, mechanics stealing supplies, customers complaining about wait times. I started quietly cleaning things up. Implemented a parts tracking system, negotiated with official distributors for a 15% discount, trained 3 guys in diagnostics. They used to just swap parts at random. Within a year the shop's profit grew by 35%. Dennis patted me on the back and gave me a bonus, $1,000. Not a word about a promotion. Marley worked as a realtor for a small firm. She was good with people, confident, smiley, always up on local gossip. But she didn't sell much. For all of 2015 she made about $18K in commissions. Meanwhile her expenses were gym minus $200 per month, clothes minus $400 minimum, esthetician minus $300, restaurants, another $500. I covered the difference from my salary. I didn't complain back then. I loved her. Every evening when I came home with grease on my hands, no matter what soap I bought, It never fully cleaned them. She'd kiss me and say, "We're a team." I was saving for my dream, restoration shop for classic American cars. I set aside $200 minus $300 a month from each paycheck. I had a secret stash in a separate account Marley didn't know about. She thought we were just a not rich young family. Not my fault she never asked where the extra money I brought in, beyond the mortgage and groceries, was going. In 2016 I opened my own little business in a rented garage in an industrial zone. I called it Classic Rides by Jake. On weekends and evenings after work at Dennis's, I spent my time there restoring someone else's Chevy Bel Air or Ford Thunderbird. Marley hated it. "You're always hanging out in that dirty garage," she'd say. "We haven't been to a restaurant in 2 months." I'd answer that it was an investment in our future. She'd roll her eyes. In 2017, Beverly died of a heart attack. It happened suddenly. She just collapsed in the kitchen making breakfast. Marley was devastated. She cried every night for 2 weeks. I tried to be there, took time off, took her to a therapist. Dennis looked broken too. They'd been together 38 years. But exactly 4 months after the funeral, Dennis announced, "I've met someone. Her name is Sherry." Marley and I exchanged glances. No one knew he was looking. A week later we met Sherry in person. She was 42, Dennis was 63, pumped lips, dark hair with red streaks, silicone breasts that looked like 2 oranges even under a sweater. She'd worked as a pharmacist at a CVS but quit as soon as she met Dennis. I disliked her immediately, not because of her looks but because of how she looked at Dennis's things. She walked into the house and started commenting, "Oh, this couch is old, throw it out. This clock? Dennis, why do you need antiques?" Within a month she'd rearranged the furniture, thrown out photos of Beverly, and advised Dennis to sell his coin collection. "They're just gathering dust anyway." Marley was horrified but couldn't argue with her father. Her brother Kyle, who by then was deep into drugs, first weed, then oxycodone, didn't show up in the family at all. Marley was alone against Sherry. I was on her side, but Dennis only listened to his new wife. Soon Sherry started pressuring Dennis about the business. "Why are you paying that guy, me, $55K when he's just a mechanic? You can hire a Mexican for 30. Dennis waved it off, but I could see his attitude toward me shifting. He stopped including me in planning meetings, began checking my invoices, brought in some outside consultant. That's when Marley told me, "We need to make more money, fast. If Dad kicks us out, we'll have nothing." I agreed. I worked even harder. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. for Dennis, then 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. in my own shop. I started taking on more restoration jobs. By the end of 2017, my little shop was bringing in $1,500 a month net. Not a lot, but enough to grow my stash. Marley, meanwhile, was becoming more irritable. She didn't like that I was gone all day. She stopped waiting for me with dinner. We stopped having sex. First once a week, then once a month, then hardly ever. When I tried to talk, she'd answer, "I'm tired. You only think about your hunks of metal." In mid-2018, Marley changed. Drastically. She started going to Lifetime Fitness in Scottsdale. Not a regular gym, but the kind with a $200 membership fee, a heated pool, a juice bar, and personal trainers. I said, "Marley, maybe find something cheaper? We have that credit card bill for the bathroom renovation hanging over us." She answered, "I deserve better." "You can't give me that?" "Really?" She bought new workout clothes minus $120 Lululemon leggings, $180 Nike sneakers, backless tops. She started dyeing her hair more often, used to be every 2 months, now every 3 weeks. Grew gel nails, used tanning beds, started wearing perfume I'd never smelled on her before, some sweet, cloying scent. I asked, "Did you meet someone?" She laughed, "Jake, God, you're so paranoid. I just want to look good for myself. It's called self-respect." Then the delays started. At first she'd say she was staying late showing a house. Rich clients from California want to watch the sunset. An hour late. Then 2. Then 9 o'clock at night. I called, she didn't pick up, then called back an hour later. "Sorry, didn't hear my phone. I was in the basement of the house." I noticed she started hiding her phone. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter when she showered. Now she took it everywhere, even the bathroom. Once I walked into the bedroom unexpectedly, she quickly flipped the phone face down. Her eyes darted. She said, "Can't you knock?" One time I saw over her shoulder that she was texting someone named Xander on iMessage. I asked who that was. My client, she answered without blinking. Buying a house in Paradise Valley. A trust fund kid, funny, harmless. I asked how old. About 27. Rich, his dad trades something. I let it go. Just a client, right? How blind I was. This Xander, what a name, who names their kid Xander in the 90s, turned out to be a serial gigolo. I only found that out a year later. It was Friday, September 14, 2018. I remember the date because the next week we had a scheduled couples therapy session. Marley agreed after I threatened to leave if nothing changed. The irony. I left Dennis's work early, around 4 p.m. One of my restoration clients, an older lady named Marilyn, had asked for help with wiring in her garage. I did it quickly, she gave me cookies, and I decided, I'll head home early, make dinner. Maybe Marley and I can finally talk normally. We had a keypad lock on the front door. I punched in the code and turned the handle. The first thing I noticed was a pair of men's shoes on the mat in the entryway. Expensive, leather, size 12. My feet are smaller. Marley? I called. Silence. Then I heard water running, the shower in the bedroom upstairs. I went up. In the bedroom, clothes were strewn on the bed. Women's jeans, lace bra. I'd never seen it on Marley before, obviously new, men's gray Calvin Klein boxers. Next to the nightstand stood a half-empty bottle of $80 wine, Sonoma Pinot Noir, which we couldn't afford. And 2 glasses. One had lipstick smudge. My heart pounded so loud I heard the pulse in my ears. I went downstairs, sat in an armchair, and waited. 5 minutes later the shower turned off. 3 minutes after that, Marley came out of the bathroom. In just a towel, wet, steam rising from her hair. She saw me and froze. Wide eyes, dilated pupils. Not from fear, from shock at being caught. Jake, you're early. I wasn't expecting. Her voice cracked. Whose underwear is on the bed, Marley? She opened her mouth, closed it. And at that moment, he came out of the bathroom. Xander. I recognized him from Instagram, huge, pushing 6 feet 3 inches, muscular, with a perfect six-pack and a lion tattoo on his left pec. He didn't even look scared. He was completely calm, like it was his house. He was only wearing jeans, shirtless, a towel over his shoulder. Dude, he said to me, relax. That's life. I started shaking. I stood up. I'm half a foot shorter, 5 feet 10 inches to his 6 feet 3 inches, but I was ready to rip his throat out. Marley screamed, don't touch him. Jake, it's not what you think. He just came over to discuss house paperwork and he felt sick. He decided to take a shower. I looked at her. Seriously? That's your answer? Take a shower, with a bottle of wine and your bra on the floor? Xander smirked. He pulled on a t-shirt, grabbed his shoes, walked up close to me. Listen, pal, he said quietly so Marley couldn't hear. She's been mine for 6 months. Yeah, 6 months. You just pay for the house while I bang your wife. You don't want trouble, stay quiet. I didn't hit him. I clenched my fists, but I didn't hit him. Because something cold clicked in my head. I realized, if I hit him, Marley will call the cops, I'll get arrested, and she wins. I just said, get out of my house. He left. Marley fell to her knees and cried harder than she had at her mother's funeral. I didn't say a word. I grabbed the keys to the Mustang, left the house, and drove to my shop. I sat there until morning, staring at the wall. I didn't cry. I just ran through all the red flags I'd missed. The next 2 weeks were hell. Marley begged me to come back. She sent 100 texts a day. I love you, it was a mistake, he means nothing to me, you are my home. She came to the shop with flowers. She baked cookies, even though she'd never baked before. She said she deleted Xander's number and blocked him everywhere. I wanted to believe her. Honestly. But there was already a worm of doubt inside me. I noticed that her pleas for forgiveness always came with questions about money. You're not going to quit working for Dad, are you? We need the money. You won't take the furniture out of the house, will you? It's ours. Jake, if we get divorced, Dad will fire you and you'll have nothing. She was playing on my fears. I didn't know that then. I thought she really was afraid of losing our family. I agreed to try again. Condition. We see a couples therapist. She agreed. In the first session, she cried and told the therapist, a middle-aged woman, that Jake became distant and she wasn't getting enough attention. The therapist looked at me sympathetically. I stayed quiet. I didn't want to shout, She was sleeping with another man for 6 months, because I knew that therapy would turn into a battlefield. But I wasn't an idiot. I hired a private investigator. Victor was a Phoenix police veteran, retired and working for himself. I paid him $1,500 for initial investigation. 4 days later he sent me photos. Marley and Xander kissing by a pool at a house on Palm Street. The dates on the photos were a week after her promise to cut off contact. Victor also found out that the house where they were meeting belonged to Dennis. My father-in-law was renting it out through a realty company for corporate events and photo shoots. And who was the realtor who arranged the rental? Marley. She was using her father's business property for dates with her lover and probably pocketing the commission. I realized, I need to prepare for divorce, and I need to be sneaky about it. I started secretly withdrawing money from our joint account, in small amounts, $500 minus $600 at a time, under parts for the shop. Marley didn't check the account. She was spending so much on the gym and esthetician that she didn't notice my moves. In a month I transferred $11,000 to my separate account. I thought I had time. I was wrong. One morning when I drove to Dennis's house to pick up some tools, I was met by a sheriff's deputy. He handed me papers. Marley had filed for divorce. The filing read, "Spouse Jake M. exhibits aggressive behavior, threatens physical harm, abuses alcohol, and is incapable of providing a mentally healthy environment for the spouse." No mention of kids. We didn't have any, thank God. I was furious. I've never threatened Marley in my life. I drink 1 beer every 2 weeks after a hard day, and mostly it's non-alcoholic. I showed the papers to my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, an old balding Jewish guy with tired eyes who'd been doing divorces for 30 years. "Jake," he said, adjusting his glasses, "she hired a lawyer from the firm, Smith, Cole and Associates. Those are top predators in Scottsdale. They don't just want a divorce, they want to squeeze every last drop out of you. She claims you're mentally unstable. Any witnesses?" "Only her friend Chloe, who hates me." "Chloe? Who asked you for $5,000 for a procedure?" I nodded. "Chloe got pregnant by some random guy at a bar, didn't know who the father was, and came to me asking for money for an abortion. I refused because we had our own debts. She threw a tantrum and swore I'd regret this. I guess she got her chance." Henderson shook his head. "That's bad. She's testifying that she saw you, drunk, chasing Marley with a hammer. It's a lie, but a judge might believe it if Marley's lawyer presents it well. We urgently need proof of the affair and her perjury." At the next hearing, the judge temporarily evicted me from the house. Restraining order. I had 48 hours to get my personal belongings. When I arrived with the police officer, Marley stood on the doorstep in a new robe, drinking coffee from my favorite mug. It had a wrench printed on it and the words, "World's okayest mechanic," and smiling. Xander wasn't in the house, but on the coffee table was a box from the latest model iPhone minus $1,200. "Hi, Jake," she said coldly. "Get your rusty tools out of the garage and get lost." I took my clothes, my documents, and Toby the cat, whom Marley tried to shove into a carrier and dump at a shelter. "He sheds, Sherry says she's allergic. The cat is fat, orange, and mean." He scratched Marley when she handed him over. I was proud of him. I slept in my shop on a cot. The cat slept on a box of spare parts. 3 weeks on a cot changes a man. When you wake up cold at 3 a.m., hear the neighboring garage cutting metal, and see a cat looking at you accusingly, you realize that either you die morally, or you start killing. I chose the latter, but without violence. Cold revenge. I hired Victor full-time, $2,000 a month. He went full surveillance on Marley, Xander, and Sherry. Yes, I suspected Sherry might be involved in this story for a reason. Why would Xander want Marley? She wasn't rich, but she was a door to Dennis, and Dennis was a door to the business. Victor confirmed my suspicions 2 weeks later. He sent me video shot with a telephoto lens from 200 yards away. Xander and Sherry walking into the Desert Oasis motel on the outskirts of Mesa. They weren't hiding. Sherry was in heels and a short dress. Xander had his hand on her ass. In the background was their dirty gray Mercedes that Dennis had bought Sherry for their anniversary. I watched that video 10 times. I had a plan, but it required patience. I also had Henderson dig into Xander's background. Turns out he wasn't a trust fund kid at all. His real name is Alexander Crawford. He's from Las Vegas. In 2015 he was convicted of petty fraud, posing as a sports agent and taking money from young athletes for promotion. In 2016 he fathered a child with a woman named Crystal Hayes but didn't pay child support, racking up $27,000 in arrears. That's why he was hunting wealthy women. Marley wasn't the target, she was a stepping stone to Sherry and Dennis's money. The idiot fell for a professional gigolo. I kept all those facts. Every document, every photo. I was loading my nuclear briefcase. Dennis died on April 5, 2019. Heart attack. He was 65. When Marley called me, her voice was oddly dry. She didn't cry. She said, "Dad died. The funeral is Tuesday. Are you coming?" I said I would. Not for her, but for the man who gave me my first chance in life, even if he later turned his back on me. At the funeral I saw the whole family together for the first time in 6 months. Marley was in a black dress, with perfect makeup. She looked more like a guest at a social event than a grieving daughter. Sherry stood by the casket holding a handkerchief and sobbing loudly, but I didn't see a single tear on her face. Marley's brother, Kyle, came in wrinkled jeans smelling of weed. He approached me after the service. "Jake," he whispered, looking around, "did you know the old man rewrote his will 3 weeks before he died?" "No. I was at the house when the notary came. Sherry made him sign something while he was on oxycodone. He could barely sit in the chair, his hand was shaking. She kept saying, 'Right here, dear, sign right here.' I wanted to step in, but she said she'd call the cops if I didn't leave." My heart sank. Oxycodone is a strong painkiller. Dennis had a legal prescription from a 2017 knee surgery. But Sherry, being a pharmacist, had access to drugs. What if she manipulated the dosage? After the funeral we went to Dennis's lawyer, Mr. French. There the will was read. Kyle got $50,000 in an old apartment in Mesa. Marley got $200,000 in cash. Everything else, 4 shops, 2 warehouses, 3 commercial buildings, and the Paradise Valley house, went to Sherry. Marley turned pale. "This is a mistake," she said, voice trembling. "Dad promised me the business. We talked about it. He wanted Jake to run the shops." The lawyer spread his hands. "It's in black and white, the will of Dennis Myers. Signed in front of 2 witnesses and a notary." Sherry stood in the corner with a faint smile. She didn't even try to look sad. In that moment I understood. Sherry and Xander played Marley like a cheap fiddle. Xander was supposed to distract Marley, make her fall for him, so she wouldn't watch her father's affairs. Meanwhile Sherry worked on Dennis. Now Sherry had the business. Marley had $200,000, a decent sum, but not an empire. And I had nothing except a garage, a cat, and a broken dream. But I knew something they didn't. I didn't go to divorce court immediately. I waited. I let Marley believe she'd won. She'd stopped hiding Xander. They appeared together in restaurants, shopped together. She bought a new car, a $55,000 BMW X3, part of that $200,000. She posted photos on Instagram with captions like, "New life, new happiness." Her friends liked them. One of her friends commented, "Finally you got rid of that dirty mechanic." I stockpiled evidence. Victor got 1. Photos of Xander and Sherry at the motel, 9 meetings over 2 months. 2. Marley's statements showing she'd transferred money from our joint account to Xander's, about $8,000 total. I found printouts she forgot to shred. 3. A recording of Sherry talking to the notary. "Dennis isn't himself, but we'll sign anyway, just say he's competent." The notary turned out to be an old pharmacy acquaintance of Sherry's. It was illegal, and I planned to use it. Additionally, I found an old friend of Dennis's, Mr. Harrison, who confirmed that a month before his death, Dennis complained, "Sherry is giving me some pills that make my vision swim. I don't remember what I signed yesterday." Harrison was willing to testify. In June 2019, I filed a counterclaim in the divorce. With Henderson, I presented to the judge transcript of the recording where Marley and Xander admitted to the affair and mocked me. Harrison's testimony. A forensic psychiatrist's report, hired by me, analyzing Dennis's medical records and concluding that the high dose of lorazepam found in his toxicology, yes, I fought in court for exhumation of the analysis, could not have been prescribed by a licensed physician. The judge scheduled a separate hearing on the will fraud. Sherry was called in for deposition. She showed up with her lawyer but looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Xander was also called as a witness, but he didn't show, citing emotional distress. The Arizona police launched an investigation into Sherry for fraud against a vulnerable adult. Dennis was deemed vulnerable due to the drugs and illegal possession of controlled substances. When her house was searched, they found missing drugs from the pharmacy where she used to work. Sherry was arrested. She was released on $50,000 bail. She couldn't raise it, spent 2 days in jail until her lawyer got her out. When Marley found out that Xander was sleeping with Sherry, she came to my shop. It was the first time she'd set foot on my turf since the divorce. She was in tears, no makeup, a wrinkled t-shirt. "You knew?" she asked. "You knew about them and didn't tell me?" "Marley," I answered calmly. "You chose him over me. You signed documents calling me an alcoholic. You lost. Go home." She tried to hit me. I stepped back. She fell to her knees in a puddle of oil on the concrete floor and sobbed. Toby the cat sat on the counter and hissed at her. It was a pathetic sight. In August 2019, Desert Ranch's assets were frozen pending the investigation. The bank that had lent against the business demanded a fire sale to cover Dennis's debts, which Sherry had forgotten to mention, about $800,000. I went to the creditors' meeting with Henderson. I offered to buy the shops. I had $45,000 in personal savings, a $30,000 home equity loan, yes. I got the house back via court because Marley couldn't pay the mortgage after her accounts were frozen, and another $40,000 from an investor, an old restoration client who believed in me. The bank agreed. I paid $210,000 for all 4 shops, 2 warehouses, and the brand name. That was 1/5 of the real value. I renamed the business, Jake's Garage and Classics. I fired all the managers Sherry had appointed. They knew nothing about cars. I rehired the old mechanics she'd laid off. The first month after the purchase I slept on the office couch, working 18-hour days. In November 2019, I got permission to put up the sign over the main entrance. I stood on Thomas Road, watching the letters spell out my name, and tears ran down my face. I hadn't cried once after Marley's affair. But that day I cried like a child. Xander. He was arrested for child support arrears in December 2019. He did 90 days in Maricopa County Jail, the one where inmates wear pink underwear, Sheriff Arpaio's famous touch. When he got out, Marley tried to take him back, that stupid woman. He stole her BMW, she couldn't make the payments, the car was repossessed 2 months later, and fled to Las Vegas. The last I heard, he works as a bouncer at a strip club for $15 per hour plus tips. His Instagram is gone. His modeling portfolio with dumbbells is gone. Sherry. Convicted of fraud and involuntary harm, the medication overdose to Dennis. She got 2 years probation and was ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution to the family. She has no money because all of Dennis's assets were sold. She lives in a trailer park in Glendale, works the night shift as a pharmacist. Marley ran into her at a supermarket once. They got into a fight screaming, "You stole my father," and, "You're insane." Both were fined. Kyle, Marley's brother. He quit drugs after I offered him a job. I gave him a chance, a warehouse assistant position. 6 months later he became warehouse manager. He's been clean for 2 years. We sometimes have a beer on Fridays. He doesn't talk to Marley, says she's too toxic. His words. Chloe, the false witness, I sued her for perjury. She got a $5,000 fine and mandatory community service. She no longer has friends in our circle. Everyone found out she lied about the hammer. Marley. She lives in a trailer park in Casa Grande. It's cold there in winter, unbearably hot in summer. She works as a Walmart cashier. Her pay is $12.50 per hour. She's lost weight, her skin is bad, she stopped dyeing her hair. I heard she tried to return to real estate, but her license was suspended after a client complained of fraud. She tried to sell a house that no longer belonged to the seller. 2 months ago she sent me a letter, 3 pages in tiny handwriting. She wrote, "Jake, I was blind. Xander promised me everything, but you were real. You were the only one who truly loved me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please let me come over once to pick up my photos from the house. I miss the smell of your garage rags. I miss our mornings." I didn't reply. I burned her letter in the grill. Toby the cat sat next to me and purred approvingly. It's June 2022. I'm writing this post 3 years after the divorce. I have 4 shops, 25 employees, annual revenue $2.1 million. I'm not a millionaire, but I run a profitable business with no debt. I sleep 8 hours a night. I go to a regular gym. I cook myself breakfast and read the news. And most importantly, I have a new life. 3 months ago I met a woman named Emily. She's an doctor. She loves coffee, hates lying, and doesn't wear expensive clothes. I introduced her to Toby the cat. Toby climbed into her lap within 10 minutes, a record for him. Emily knows my whole history. I told her everything on the 3rd date. She said, "You handled the shit like an adult. That's sexy." She moved in with me. Sometimes she sees me staring at the ceiling at night, and she just puts her hand on my chest. She doesn't ask what I'm thinking about. But I'm thinking about how easy it was to lose everything and how hard it was to force myself not to give up. My message to anyone going through infidelity and divorce: don't believe in quick victories. Don't give in to emotions. If you want to destroy an enemy, destroy them in court and in business, not with your fists. Collect evidence, be patient, work 3 times as hard as usual. And don't let anyone devalue your work. Marley called me a boring old man for saving money for my shop and not taking her to restaurants every week. Now she lives in a trailer and serves 200 customers a day. Xander, who seemed to her like a fun trust fund kid, ejects drunk men from a club for minimum wage. Choose not the one who promises pretty things. Choose the one who fixes broken things while you sleep.